Got it.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everybody, or anybody who's watching. My name is Hilton. I am the General Manager of Alba Wellness Valley in Central Vietnam. I am also the Ambassador for World Wellness Weekend in Vietnam. And today we have a distinguished guest who's traveled and lived in many different places around the world, who is also an ambassador of World Wellness Weekend. So yeah, one team, one goal. And so maybe you can go ahead and introduce yourself, John, please.
Thank you, Hilton. And it's great to be on the show. My name is John Nielsen, as you correctly said, and I am a World Wellness Weekend ambassador. My background is a bit of confusion. I am a man of mystery in some ways, but I carry 3 passports. And it's not because I'm on a special mission from CIA or anything like that. It's just the way how life has turned out. So I was born and bred in London, in Wimbledon, where they play a bit of tennis from time to time, but grew up in Copenhagen. So effectively, I'm a Dane. And I lived in Denmark for 25, 26 years and was in the military and grew up in a fairly sort of normal household. But grew up in a household actually where music and where travel was always part of my life. So when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do, hospitality was one of those things that I was recommended on a few occasions, and I more fell into hospitality. But sport was always part of my life. So I was a professional, semi, whatever you want to call it. In those days, that tells you how old we are. But in those days, professional squash was not really in existence. I mean, there was people making money from it, but I was a very active squash player. I played for Denmark as a junior and even as a senior. So sport and I were 2 things that followed my life always. And I'd always thought about going in to do sports science or going into the professional world of soccer. That was actually, and at one point I was offered to manage some people and coaching some professionals. So it was for me totally natural that was a world I was always in. But then I actually ended up in hospitality and started living in Portugal and Spain for 3 years, and then went off to Switzerland to go to school and get a formal education. And then I got sent to Asia, and that's what started kind of on the Asian journey. And along the road, I had met my wife and had met, 3 kids came along. But I've lived for the last nearly 30 years in Australia. So Melbourne is really my home. So hence I have an Australian passport also, just to make life easier. But so many years of my hospitality life has always been spent living in Asia. And Asia has a certain, as you know, it has a certain buzz, and it has a certain way of living and a lot of charm also.
Wow. Yeah, that is complicated. I always thought I was a little bit complicated. It's definitely more complicated. So it's true, over the time when we got to know each other a little bit better and speaking, and then it's, so you were in London. Okay, so you actually came from Denmark. So yeah, it's interesting. But hey, that's life, and the world is a big place.
That's the global world. And I always say that to everybody. I say, it also causes you a bit of confusion in your internal life, is that you sometimes don't really know where you come from. And we, when with the kids, we decided to make Melbourne our home for a number of years. My wife is a Sydney-sider, so from Sydney in Australia. And we sort of thought, in some ways, it's actually good to be in one place, because it gives the kids roots, and it gives the kids a sense of where they belong and where they've come from. And I think that's really important and I definitely had that. I mean, I grew up in Copenhagen. I'm Danish in that sense. So I have a root system where I come from. But I think it's really important for young people. And I think people, like your kids and like many kids around the world who live in different places, as they grow older. And I remember asking a GM in Switzerland, I said to him, where's your friendship? And he said, really, as a child, I don't really have many friends, because my father was a hotelier with Intercon and we moved so much around. Yeah. He said, my friends came from university. So I think there's a lot saying that and I have great friends in Denmark, that I have a handful of them, still have them, had them for 40, 50 years. So I think there's a lot to be said for giving kids a foundation.
Yeah. but like a lot of people tell me as well, the fact that they've been around and seen the
That
world
gives them an advantage, correct?
definitely puts them on a. There's ups and downs.
Yeah, there's a balance with those things.
So let me ask you some questions now that we know you personally and where and how and your family and everything. So hospitality. So I know, again, complicated and long story because it's not just I went there, I did this, and now I'm here. I know you've been around and you've worked for a couple of companies as well. So maybe you can share with us your past.
So I share my past. It sounds like I've done something wrong. No. So I mean, my real start, I suppose, is Asia. So I mean, I was with a big Danish travel company in the southern part of Europe, so Spain and Portugal, and then I did my hotel schooling. But that's what got me into Asia, and that's when I joined Hyatt, and I was with Hyatt for about 10 years. And I always say, the base fundamentals that I got and it's the old Hyatt, not sort of the new Hyatt today that is a much different change and bigger company and much more growth company. So when I was with them, they were a lot smaller. They was really divided in Hyatt Asia Pacific and Hyatt Americas in those days. But there's a lot of those people who hired me and who I worked with who have been with Hyatt for 30 years and who really are the base. And I always think from a hospitality sense, that's where I learned my real base. And I was with Mandarin Oriental in Hong Kong, who in those days was one of the great hotels of the world. And I think those leaders that I was with, they gave me those fundamentals of what was important and how we deal with customers and how customers, the experience and the Grand Hyatt Hong Kong lobby, which I was there for nearly 4 years, was one of those benchmark lobbies that people would come and look and see. And I always remember the GM saying to me, this lobby is all about the show and is all about the experience. So I always say to when you design a hotel or when you create a hotel, it's really about creating that experience for the guest, but at the same time, never losing touch of, that beauty and how staff interact. And I think it's sometimes the biggest challenge for us who, like yourself and me and many of our colleagues who work in beautiful hotels, is we actually forget to look at the building. We forget to sometimes look what the architect has designed. And we don't really appreciate it enough until we probably leave the hotel, and then we come back and go, oh, isn't this a gorgeous building? I mean, the picture behind me that I'm sitting and I'm sitting 10 meters from is this beautiful structure that's made out of bamboo. And the beauty of these things that architects create. But when you start then looking at the complex design, and often we don't do that. And I remember I was a duty manager at some point at Grand Hyatt, and I used to get these Germans who would come in and say to me, yeah, doch. And then they'd leave. And I'm thinking, what is it? As I didn't really understand what was going on. And then the GM said to me in a morning meeting once, so John, has any people been coming in to see the lobby? Oh, actually, yes. I said, it's really weird. There's Germans. I said, I know you're German, sir, so all respect, but there's all these Germans who keep coming in and look, they don't go in, they just stay for 2 minutes and they leave. Oh, and then he said to me, we're in the Berlitz Guide, and the Berlitz Guide had the Grand Hyatt lobby as a place to visit. Don't come for dinner or lunch. No, just come to the lobby. So there was all these people who did, and I told that story when I was in a hotel school, running a hotel school, Le Roche, the Swiss hotel school, and I was telling the story to the master students and explaining to them, this is part of the guest flow and how the guest flow works. And a couple of students actually went to Hong Kong. We were in Shanghai in those days, and they went for a weekend to Hong Kong, and they did exactly that. They went into the lobby, and they saw the lobby, and they came back, and they came in Monday morning, and they said, it's true, Mr. Nielsen. And I'm thinking, what's true? What have I done? What? And then they told me what it was all about. And the one girl ended up actually getting a corporate traineeship with them, funnily enough, because she was so amazed by the place. So architects and interior designers, they have this amazing nudge to create these beautiful works and these beautiful masterpieces that you and I work in. But sometimes we don't actually really pay attention to them, which it's so much important part of. And I always say to people, hospitality is about the experience, or going into a great restaurant. I always say to people, the food and the service is probably 60%, And actually the atmosphere, so the lighting, the music is 40% of that experience. And that's what I would always say to students, that if you think that way, then that's what makes it a great experience.
Yeah.
And you get 2 out of 3 right, you're okay.
I think you touched on something really important there. So maybe I can ask you a little bit of a question. It's not exactly where I wanted to go, but you brought it up. So if we can maybe come into an area where we have both a common interest, or how we actually met is through the wellness side.
Yes.
So, I know that if we look at Global Wellness Institute, there's a lot of articles about the growth in architecture and development within wellness. So besides the beautiful building behind you, and you can tell us a little bit about Fivelements afterwards, how do you feel what are they calling it? Wellness architecture or wellness design?
Yeah, wellness real estate or something like
going on. Is it a little bit of, not so real and a bit of a marketing strategy, which, yeah, it is to a certain degree, but tell us a little bit of your thoughts in terms of how you see the wellness design in buildings, because the bamboo, for all intents and purposes, is wellness in many different ways.
Yeah. And look, and
eco-friendly.
Correct. And I think when you look at designs, you have to look at, you have to look at the sustainability aspect of the building. Where does it come from? What are we doing to nature? And how do we build the building? And what are we actually doing? So I think when you look at that, and I always say to people, wellness in running a wellness retreat is inside outside. Yeah. So it's about what we do inside the buildings and how we treat those buildings, because at the end of the day, real estate buildings are a living organ. Yeah. I mean, they live as you treat them. And if you build them well and you insulate them in the right ways and you treat them in the right way, whether it's bamboo or whatever you're building it with. So I think one of the big, yes, it's partly marketing, but the bottom line is that customers come to a restaurant, to a hotel, wherever they come, and the Instagram generation, which is, I hasten to say, not your and my generation, but the slightly younger generation of our children, they go to all these places. And the first thing they do is that they're looking at the sounds, they're looking at the sights, and they're looking at that environment. So the wellness sense of a building and the architecture is such an important part of where people are coming to, because it's about the environment. And so if I go into a great space and I feel super relaxed or super happy, then that will also impact me on what I'm sitting. And I remember when I was doing the test, or whatever you call it, the system in the schools, and some of the students would say to me, yes, but that doesn't work for a McDonald's. I said, of course it works for a McDonald's or a Kentucky Fried Chicken, because what is McDonald's? When you go into their buildings, they are very much designed in a sense of they're clean, the airflow is good, the toilets are clean. So there's a whole range of things that ultimately become part of that service. And so if I grab a hamburger in a fast food place and I sit down, then I still want to sit in a clean seat and I still want to sit on a clean table. So it doesn't matter if it's a fine food or it's a fast food operation I'm going into. And Starbucks, and I used to say to the students, why do you like going to Starbucks? And usually most of them would say, oh, free Wi-Fi. But, and in those days, you had to pay for Wi-Fi, but they will always tell you, oh, actually the lounge furniture is really comfortable. The environment is really nice. Oh, the coffee's pretty average, but everything else is really nice. So I think what one talks about within the Global Wellness Institute and what you talk about, the wellness real estate, there's a lot of truth in it. I think it's also very important to clarify with that is that, of course, it's important, but ultimately you have to look at how the human element walks through buildings and how the human element, because it's the good old thing about in a bedroom where you've got the air conditioning flowing in the wrong direction that you sleep badly. So it's really about also understanding those aspects. And that's what ultimately creates a good environment. And that's what an architect has to look at, because how many times have we not seen a hotel room or a restaurant where they've got the air conditioning running in the wrong section, or the lighting is wrong, and how frustrating, or the music is too loud, or whatever it may be. So that's ultimately about building. And I mean, we're lucky in that sense that the great properties, and you look at the Ritz-Carlton Millenia in Singapore, which is such an iconic building in that sense. that when they actually built the building, they forgot to, all the bathrooms, they actually forgot to put a film on top of the glass. So actually the result was that people standing at the Mandarin could see people having a shower. And only when it had just opened, and a fellow national of your country, James McBride, James, who I worked with, told me the story and said that they got these phone calls next door, and there was the guest in the Mandarin was saying, "Hang on, is that a naked body in there? I can see," and they realized, "Oh my God, they haven't put the film." So it goes back to again that whole thought process of that you have to tick all the various aspects. So I think there is a lot of truth in it, but it also highlights beautiful places that people will go to and what that Instagram generation is looking at. And if we feel good in a building and we feel healthy, hey, then that makes two and two come sense. But you have to look at the how the building is built. You've got to, what materials have they built it out of?
Maybe if we can touch a little bit, I mean, we both are general managers of wellness retreats or wellness resorts.
Yeah.
So maybe you can touch a little bit on your views in terms of this massive boom of wellness travel, wellness awareness. Obviously, it's good for our business. What are your views? I mean, what do you guys do there at Fivelements? And maybe you can touch a little bit on that.
So I mean, the wellness world has as you say, Craig, has had a boom. I mean, after COVID, people suddenly were looking to what can I internally do to make myself feel better. This business here, Fivelements, was started in 2010. So they were very much the sort of front runners before the wellness industry really took off. And I still believe on the big picture, we still are a niche market. I mean, we're still a niche market that is growing steadily but surely, because the awareness as has been created through the various marketing channels has made it. Is it such a global $1 trillion industry? Often I think it's largely exaggerated, but it has created a awareness, and it has built an awareness of what people do. So our program here, and we have only 20 rooms, so we're small but very intense. So we have 50% of our guests, or 40 to 50% of our guests, are on programs. So they come for 3, 5, 7, 10-day, 12-day programs. And it's all plant-based food. And we have a 3,500 or 3,700 square meter garden where we grow beans and herbs and vegetables and fruits, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really about that we have a small footprint, and it's really about that when a guest comes here, then they're experiencing what Bali probably traditionally was in the old days. And the buildings are all reflects in that sense that, of course, that as the buildings have, as architecture has got modern, there's more and more amenities, but it's really about taking people on a bit of a spiritual type journey and making people feel good. And the other people I was just having a coffee or tea with before, they were Russians, and he has 25 KFCs, so not the healthiest of food in the world. But, we should all be able to eat that and have fun with that. And he's here because kind of having left Russia. And he said to me, I eat plant-based food now with you, and I feel so much lighter and I feel so much healthier. And, from a nutritional sense, we should be eating 70% vegetables. And yeah, we need protein. We need a bit of fish. We need a bit of meat. There's no doubt about that. But he said, I feel so much healthier. And his father said the same, and the mother said the same. And I just said, yeah, because it's processing through your body. It's, the diet is doing well, and you're having a good time. And I think it's a really important aspect about people coming to a place like yours or mine, that everybody is there to enjoy themselves, and they calm down, they sleep better, and ultimately the body is having to detox in that sense, in a way. And it's not rigid. I mean, I think that's also, I think sometimes in the wellness world, that sometimes we become a bit like cults, that we are trying to force all these things onto people. And I think then that wellness aspect starts. I mean, I see people coming and saying to me they want to go on a juice detox. And I just go, nah, you're not going on a juice detox. It is researched. And as a nutritionist, as an educated nutritionist, I just go, no, 2 to 3 days, fine, but not longer, because your body does not need it. And your body is an intelligent animal, and your body doesn't need to juice detox. It's not healthy. So one has to be really careful, I think, with a lot of these things. And it has to be so, because there's a lot of people who don't know what wellness and what a retreat is. So we offer a lot of 3-day, which is like an introduction. where people get the sense and understanding and going, oh, okay, I do yoga every morning, I do exercises, I do various treatments. And that gives them the introduction to wellness. And I think that's super important, because there's a lot of people who then get injuries if they don't do it right. And so it has to be a step-by-step approach.
I think what you mentioned there, I mean, firstly, it's fantastic to listen to you and watch you, because the passion, you're enjoying what you're doing.
Thank you. Love what we do.
And I mean, it's inspiring. I also enjoy what I do. I mean, that's why I think we communicate.
Yeah, 100%.
Because it's, giving people something that's really changing their lives and helping them, like your Russian friend, who's obviously been eating a lot of unhealthy food and now discovering plant-based. So it makes us feel like we've helped somebody. But I can see your passion there.
Well, I think it's not just about we're helping somebody, but if we can, give them that roadmap to transformation, and to think that longer term it's going to benefit them, then your and my job is done in that sense. We've helped that person. But we can't be I don't want to be a cult person who sits and says, oh, you should do this. No, I want people to naturally embrace it.
So maybe I can ask you then, if somebody is watching this who's a general manager of any property within the world, and his owners have come to him and go, we want to be more wellness, make us more wellness, which is going on all over the world at the moment. What would you recommend?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is I think you have to look at the property, because there are a lot of people who, let's get into the wellness business, but you have to have it as a core understanding of what you're doing. And and I mean, Accor, that little boutique hotel group, they are out there talking wellness and well-being with Emlyn. He does all these marketing talks, and I like Emlyn immensely. But the challenge I think these big hotel groups have got is that it's marketing driven. So it's great for you and I, because it's creating awareness of what wellness, and it's making people looking at other things. So I will back Emlyn any day to what he's talking about. But on an operational level, I mean, a Sofitel that's got 500 bedroom Sofitel in some resort, but how does that suddenly become wellness? I mean, where the spa is one thing, but how does the staff suddenly say, oh, no, we're all about wellness, but at the same time, we've got the buffet over in the corner serving, every wonderful fattening dessert in the world. So I think that the challenge that these big organizations are having is, they got to figure out what do they want to be, and why are they doing it? And I always say, the golden circle of why I do what I do is really important in a business. And I know, Sonal, for example, she has been talking to a lot of companies about what they can change. And it's ultimately all about, look at you yourself in terms of the property and go, okay, so what can we do? I mean, the bottom line is that if I'm a 250 bedroom Sofitel in Nusa Dua, I can't suddenly just become wellness focused, because, well, I can become wellness focused, but can I change the restaurants? Can I change? Or it's probably not feasible. So I think there's a market for this in a lot of these properties, but you really have to go a few steps back and go, what can I do? I mean, having a good spa that does things, that's all fine. But does that suddenly make the hotel wellness? No, it doesn't. So I think the true wellness retreats, hotels, they are the ones who are built for it. They are the ones who are focused on it, because we did some consulting on one of the big hotel groups, and they wanted more plant-based food. But then you go to the resort and you go, where's the plant-based food? Well, it's sitting in some menu and it's the most expensive food to buy. Okay, so you didn't really want it. You sounds good, you got it. So I think it's really about that each resort, each place is clearly looking internally and saying, okay, this is what we need to change. So, I mean, it's a tough one. I think it's a very, very tough question to how do you make a big hotel chain? I mean, I think Como, the group that Mrs. Ong owns and Mr. Ong, I think they've done a pretty remarkable job, but they've also segmented it. They've made it clear that Shambhala is their kind of wellness product. And then they are probably more holistic in terms of fitness wise, that they've sort of divvied up. And I think, that's what also guests, I mean, guests don't want to feel like they're coming to a place and, I've got to be all namaste here. I mean, I'm on holiday and I want to have a good time. I don't want to be forced to do all these things. That's an important point. Yeah. And I think that's the success of Como.
I think also the likes of Banyan Tree, which has been around very, very long time with an ethos from day one in terms of environment and guest
100%.
experience and wellness. And then obviously Six Senses with a very driven sustainability, wellness orientated concept. So they're out there and they're very successful. And
but I think, I mean, the success, as you mentioned, Six Senses, I think the success is also that Neil Jacobs has been able to drive the company, even though being bought by IHG, he has made it very clear, if we are to go forward, we are going to build this brand and we can open a multitude of locations and we can create these branches almost of Six Senses, but having the IHG machine that's helping us do the marketing, that's helping us getting all the locations. So I think that's probably where big groups can be better. And it's almost like you would look with Accor and you would say to them, I mean, Raffles they're starting to use as their sort of wellness brand, and say, well, focus on that and then create these places that then have this whole beautiful environment from a sustainability aspect, from a whole wellness cycle aspect. And I think that can work. I think when you try and change a Sofitel or a Sheraton or whatever instantly a wellness hotel, it becomes, but hang on, there's the business guy who wants to sit in the bar and have a whiskey at 2:00 in the morning. And there's there's the girls who want to go to have a ladies' long lunch with a lot of champagne. It is wellness, they're having a good time. But
I mean, we're also responsible for a top line and a bottom line.
100%. And you've got to be...
The decision has to be made how far and to what. Your example of having a plant-based dish, which is the most expensive and hidden in the menu, is a perfect example. We've done it, been there, done that.
Yeah, tick that box.
We have plant-based, but we'll sell more champagne than we will plant-based because we make more revenue. And that's the ethos of the company.
Fivelements up until mid 2019 did not have any alcohol. So booze basically here. I changed that and I put wine back on the menu. And the reason I did it was because I actually realized that it was becoming a problem, because a lot of yoga groups, as an example, and we get a fair amount of yoga groups, they were saying, why can't we have a glass of wine? Have we done something? Are we on an Alcohol Anonymous place that we're visiting? And I thought about it and I said, you know what? Exactly. I'm responsible for the top line and the bottom line. And why is it I'm shooting myself in the foot? Why is it that I'm making people, they're not a cult center where people are coming to, they're not an Alcohol Anonymous. So I think it's a balance, and I don't have whiskeys and all that stuff. I just have wines and beers. We're not talking a massive alcoholic branch that they're coming to.
Well, that's important, and I hope people pick that up, because our responsibility is to create a wellness environment and obviously run a business at the same time and portray wellness, but it doesn't mean that everyone has to eat carrots and juice for 4 or 5 days.
And before doing it, I actually had a conversation with John from Kamalaya, John Stewart. And I said to John, do you actually have wine on your list? Yes, of course we do. He says, but we don't flaunt it. If people want to drink wine, they can drink wine. I mean, it's also seen as wellness in many ways. So it's just a balance. And so that was my kind of, okay, if John does it, then I can do it also.
Funny story, and then I'll ask you my last question because we're running out of time. Kombucha. So actually what happens is here on property, we push kombucha, we have it as a welcome drink, and we do kombucha classes, and we offer it as much as possible. So I actually personally like to steer away from alcohol. We do, like you, have it on the menu, but it's really been limited. And we have guests who come here who are non-alcoholic, like myself, and they drink kombucha and they get drunk.
It's called alcohol.
So actually, we're promoting this mentioned vegetable juice that's supposed to make you healthy and happy. And we had a guest pass out the other day because she drank a glass of kombucha and she basically had a hangover. It's like, oh no.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
Ironic, isn't it?
But I mean, we make our own, like you do, and I think kombucha is great in that sense. But one has to say it does have alcohol. I mean, very small percent, but.
Last question, John. Sustainability. So I like to call environmental wellness.
Yep.
Is a very big thing as well. As much as physical and mental well-being, and people want to be healthy and happy and travel to places all over the world, can you maybe give us a little bit of your insight in terms of sustainability, environmental friendly, SDGs, triple R's, anything like that that you'd like to share about people from a wellness perspective as an operator looking after the earth? I mean, we can go for hours, I'm sure.
Oh, we could, but in short, I like to break it down in real basic terms and say what we do in the environment where we are, we should always be thinking, is this good? Is this bad? And, you know, we use a lot of bamboo in this place because, as you know, with bamboo, it's really quick to grow. But they also use a lot of wood. And I've been saying to my guys here, hey, we use too much wood because wood takes too long to regenerate. So what I've started doing with decking and stuff like that is using things like eco decking, which is basically recycled wood and recycled plastics. And ultimately, I think that's where we have to start being much more, being much more clear in our thought process, is saying, using a thing like eco decking, as I said, recycled materials, that will last you 15 to 20 years in a place. And yes, it might cost you 20 or 30% more, but ultimately it's going to last you a lot longer, and we're not knocking down some tree. And I mean, we've got, as you know, we've got too much plastic in the society. It's not just about, yes, it's about, and that's one of my gripes sometimes with the big companies, is they talk about the sustainability, but I still go into a hotel room and there's small shampoo bottles. And I go, hello, because it's really about thinking in the logic terms. How much can we not put back in the environment and when we're using products? So our garden, our big garden, is really about that sustainable aspect of the food that's only traveling a short distance to get to somebody's mouth. It's really about, I think, probably 90% of our food and beverage products comes from within a 5 to 10 kilometer radius of where we are. So we know it's been ethically and properly grown. Most of our building materials, in one way or another, are usually from Bali. I mean, the woods we use, the bamboo, is usually from northern Bali or some place around here. So it's not come that far. And I think if you kind of just break down the basics of it, that the more of that stuff you do, the better you will ultimately serve the environment. And I think sometimes sustainability gets too complicated, and there's too many things that we've got to reach to this point, we've got to reach that point. And I think a lot of these systems that people are trying to do is all good and well and done. But I just think a lot of it has to break down and say, the more kombucha you make on your own property and you make it yourself, well, it's saving parts of what you're doing. So it's good. And the farm to table type concept, it's fantastic. We do culinary classes. We take them into the garden. They pick the beans. They come back and they make the soup out of them. And they realize, oh, where did this come from? It traveled 500 meters and it's not gone in a car. So I think we just need to get the environment and political leaders and global leaders to really break things down more. I mean, Maldives, is that sustainable? Not really, but it's wonderful for business and it's wonderful for the internet generation, for the IG generation. So I think it's that way. But of course, we're still flying with airplanes. But again, airplanes are becoming more sustainable in terms of fuel they're using and the modern things. So there's a lot of stuff that's in progress. And I think we've just all together got to focus on the simple things. I mean, we always talk about, the Datai in Langkawi is just, for me, one of the best examples in the world of a place that is so well thought through. But it's financed also. They've got enough room so they can do it. But it's more difficult in a small place because the cost of doing it. So solar panels, as you know, is super expensive. And it takes you 10 to 15 years to get payback on it. So there's also governments that are part of that problem. They may say it, but it's actions that they've got to take.
But I always like to say that even though the efforts may be out of reach or crazy or not defined correctly or confusing, any effort is an effort.
100%.
Step in the right direction is awareness, and it's a good thing. But I think us as hospitality leaders, and both of us with more of a very much wellness background, it's up to us to educate people and say, stop those little plastic bottles in the shower. Redo your deck with recycled plastic or something like that. Because those, the question I asked you before is about how can you become more wellness? It's not only about the physical, mental, and architectural. You can do things like this. that's why I drive sustainable wellness or environmental wellness so much, because it's a very easy one.
And it's simple. And there's so many small things and I always get really irritated when I go into these hotels and I see this. And I've said to Emmeline, last year, I think I said to Emmeline, when are you going to tell your owners to stop all these small plastic bottles? And that's such a small thing. And at the end of the day, as you know, and I know, you save money by using the pump bottles or the bigger things. You save lots of money. You use lots of hassles. But it's getting the mental block, and it's making owners actually sit down and go, you know what, we need to change. Because I've heard that story from Accor that many times. Oh, no, we're changing. When? Why do I still keep going back into properties where the small bottles are still there? I mean, that's just a disaster what's going on there.
Exactly. So, wow, we've already reached 35 minutes. So, I mean, it's been super interesting, and it's
thank you, Hilton,
to listen and see your passion within the wellness industry and everything you've done. So, I mean, I appreciate it enormously, and you know, it's fantastic to speak to you and to listen to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hilton. Thank you.
We also both, as I mentioned in the beginning, are ambassadors for World Wellness Weekend. So please, everybody, you know, join us in September, second weekend of September. John is driving it in Indonesia, and I am driving it in Vietnam, and we want the whole world to be involved in World Wellness Weekend. It's not just about doing yoga classes on the beach, which is great. It's also about reducing plastic, doing pickups, doing environmental things as well, and looking after the world. We consider that all wellness.
And I always say to people, it's the most simple concept in the world. So just join the bandwagon and be part of it. It's so simple. There's no rocket science in it.
There you go. No rocket science. So with that last word, no rocket science, be part of the biggest trend in the world at the moment. Thank you very, very much, John. It's fantastic to have you on.
Thank you, Hilton.
Yeah, thank you very much.